Listening. It's getting more important and more serious by the minute and by the day. Life is. And this book tells us what life is like. You draw a picture, and the picture describes what you see in real life. And there's people that can draw pictures that you can't tell are not photographs. There's a guy that was hired by NASA to make up pictures of the Earth, and he made up a pretty blue marble. And he actually had a T-shirt made, real or photograph, painting or photograph, yeah. And people would say it's a photograph. No, it's a painting. I painted it personally. So anyway, okay. So Chronicles of Narnia, The Lord of the Rings, Pilgrim's Progress, a lot of books like that were allegories. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, maybe I've never read that, but that's probably a good analogy. What another one I'm trying to think of? Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels. Those were commentaries on the government of England. And, of course, you have the Defense of Duffer's Drift, which is a dream analogy, kind of like Pilgrim's Progress. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 15. Flight to the Future. Okay. The toy store seemed empty. Daniel looked around. Not a child or grown-up was to be seen. You are a lucky boy, the old woman said with a twinkle in her eye. She turned and walked slowly to the front door. Daniel's eyes went wide when she turned the knob on the lock. He heard a click. Why are you locking up? Daniel asked. He gulped down another wave of fear. I don't want us to be disturbed, Mrs. Happy said with a smile. While I torture you. As I said, you are a lucky boy. I have something very special to show you. Oh, wait here, the old woman commanded. She walked to the back of the store and disappeared into her office. When she came out, she was pushing a bicycle. Yeah, whoopie-doo. Come out with two big knitting needles, right? Crochet hooks. When she came back out, she was pushing a bicycle. At first, Daniel didn't recognize that it was a Goliath Super Wings because of all the attachments. Several odd-looking gadgets were on the handlebars. The only one that Daniel had seen inside before was a combo gizmo. I have here a fully loaded, top-of-the-line Goliath Super Wings with all the extras, Mrs. Happy said. She knocked down the kipstand. Take a look. Better yet, get on the seat and see how it feels. This is the bike of the future. The question is whether or not you'll be a part of the future. I need to get one more item. The old woman walked back into her office. Daniel started the brand new bike and then moved closer to inspect it. The gadgets on the handlebars pricked his interest the most. The oddest-looking attachment was a rather plain black box about 7 inches square. It was mounted right in the center of the handlebars. A white circled X was on the side facing the rider. Daniel bent over for a closer look. Go ahead and get on the bike, Mrs. Happy instructed. Daniel jumped. He hadn't heard the old woman walk over. He turned to say something, but instead stared at what she was holding. A small bird cage was in her hand. And inside the cage was a very nervous brown and black sparrow. Is that a pet? Daniel asked. No, it's a wild bird, the old woman said. They have to be wild to work. Work for what? Fuel, of course, Mrs. Happy said. She stared hard into his eyes. Get on the bike and I'll show you something you've never seen before. Daniel stared back into the strange eyes of the old woman. He swung a leg over and sat on the seat of the Super Wings bike. As soon as he sat down, the big board suddenly came alive. Numbers and words flashed by at a dizzying speed. Then it stopped in an electric hum. The lights frozen into words. : Welcome to the big picture tour, Daniel Bailey. Which glow? I bet you get there. Okay. While Daniel was trying to understand what the words meant, Mrs. Happy was reaching into the bird cage. The little sparrow squawked and sputtered as it tried to escape her hand. She trapped it in the corner of the cage. Hold on tight, the old woman commanded as she stepped over toward the bike. The bird was gripped tightly in the old woman's fingers. Daniel reached automatically for the handlebars. The bird's little black eyes were shiny with fear as she pushed it toward the odd black box on the handlebars. Daniel heard a voice call his name. He looked up and saw himself in the big board. The reflection was on a bicycle and had a long chain wrapped around his neck. On the chain, he could see a heavy, dark lock. Though the lock on the chain was broken open, the boy seemed to feel the weight of the chain growing heavier and heavier by the second. Then suddenly he noticed that the chain and the reflection came right out of the big board toward him. The little bird chirped once. Daniel looked down. At that instant, Mrs. Happy pushed the bird toward the white circled X. The circle seemed to open by itself as the bird was soundlessly sucked inside the box. Then the circle closed. A wild look was in the old woman's eyes. The blood of one wild bird will give you enough time for the tour, she said. Before Daniel could say a word, the Goliath Super Wings rose up off the floor of the toy store. Daniel gripped the handlebars in surprise and fear. The boy's reflected image pulled on the chain. Both boy and bicycle shot straight toward the big board as the reflected image pulled Daniel in. Daniel yelled, bracing himself for the crash, but the crash never came. He heard a popping sound like a cork being pulled from a bottle. Then he was through, zipping through the darkness. At first he couldn't see anything, but he could feel the wisps of things all around him. Then the darkness began to fade. Daniel found himself riding down a street in a town. Then he recognized that the town was Centerville. But it seemed different somehow, as if it weren't quite all solid. Objects seemed vaporous or ghost-like. The buildings and parked cars seemed watery thin, almost two-dimensional. The colors weren't as bright as they should have been. A few people were walking on the sidewalks, but they too seemed flat and thin like wet cartoons. The Super Wings bicycle flew 3 feet high in the air right down the middle of Main Street. That's when Daniel saw the toy store. The door opened and he saw Mrs. Happy rolling another Super Wings bicycle outside. Her Super Wings was loaded with attachments, just like the one Daniel was riding. She had the bird in her hand. She pushed the bird toward the black box. The bird was instantly sucked in. Mrs. Happy got on the bike and pedaled up into the air toward Daniel. Happy to see me, she asked with a laugh. Welcome to the future of your dreams. Why is Centerville so different? Because your time isn't yet. Hold on. Called a diamond hammered copper bottle. They're bedroom bottles, they're for drinking water at night. Copper's good for your arteries. It makes your arteries and veins more less likely to have an embolism, a puffy thing like a bubble on a tire blowout, you know. Anyway, it's good for you, and it sterilizes the water. Copper is very antiseptic, or what do you call it? Whatever you want to call it. Okay, so anyway, back to the book here. The old woman reached over and grabbed the chain that hung on Daniel. She aimed her bicycle higher and flew up over the row of buildings on Main Street, dragging Daniel captive behind her. Even up high, everything seemed dreamishly thin. The Superstar Award ceremony has started, the old woman said. And you're number one at last. Why? Daniel asked. What? Daniel asked. High in the air, Daniel could see the rows of parked cars and trucks in the school parking lot. A shout and a cheer went up in the distance. The riders sailed silently closer. Soon the boy and woman were over the athletic field. A great crowd was in the bleachers. In front of them were long tables full of food and drinks, and beyond the tables was a long platform. A row of boys were lined up on one side and a row of girls on the other. And behind all that was the big board mounted on 2 large poles. Lights were flashing on and off in big purple letters. Daniel Bailey, the number 1 superstar. The crowd went wild in a cheer when a boy with red hair walked across the platform. He stood next to a man who was holding a microphone. Daniel's mouth dropped open and he realized the boy was himself. That's me, Daniel said. And all those cheers are for you, the old woman said with a smile. That's because you're number 1 and a superstar. You have the highest rank among all the children in town. Really? Daniel asked. How did I get the rank? You finally smartened up, Mrs. Happy said. You saw a vision of what the future could be like and you accepted the inevitable. I did? Daniel asked. He couldn't believe his eyes. The people in the crowd leaped up to their feet with a standing ovation. In the crowd in the front row, Daniel saw his mother. A huge beaming smile was on her face as she clapped for her boy. She was radiant with happiness. Just let that applause soak in, Mrs. Happy said and smiled. She braked her bicycle and made it right over the platform. Daniel looked down at himself. Even though he was thin and watery, the stuff of dreams, the applause sure sounded real from where he was sitting in the sky. The Daniel on the platform was holding a trophy. He looked up and seemed to see Mrs. Happy and the real Daniel up in the air. The thin, ghost-like Daniel smiled broadly and held up the trophy. Liars, it's like the mountain of toys, right, for John Kramer, yeah. Smoke and mirrors, ashes, and bullshit. The crowd cheered, but the big board was flashing a message of congratulations. Mrs. Happy smiled. As she watched Daniel. Then she looked at that black box attached to the handlebars of his bike. The white circled X of the box began to glow on and off. Time to go. Your fuel is running out. Daniel didn't want to leave that place at that moment in time. The sound of the applause was the music of acceptance and approval. He hadn't heard such a sweet sound since the time he had been 9 and made the All City soccer team. This sounded even better. He felt as if he could have listened to it forever. Then the bike began to fall. Mrs. Happy aimed her bicycle for the big board. Daniel did the same. As he shot lower, he noticed the white circled X glowing on and off. The boy braced himself as the bike flew toward the headlines on the big board, proclaiming him the #1 superstar. Daniel blinked as the bike sailed right into the darkness of the mysterious panel. As the darkness lifted, he could see the shelves of toys in the distance, as if they were at the end of a long tunnel. Before he could think about it, the bicycle carried him through the other side of the big board with a slight popping sound. The bike crashed to the floor of the toy store, and Daniel went sprawling. A shot of pain went through Daniel's right leg as the pedal on the bicycle tore into his pants. The bike was sideways on the floor, the front wheels silently spinning. Mrs. Happy walked over. She held out her hand to help him up. Daniel grasped her cold hand and struggled to his feet. Mrs. Happy picked up the Super Wings bicycle and parked it on the kickstand. That was a short tour of your future, my boy, and as you see, you play a big part in the big picture of Centerville. The old woman walked around the bike. She bent over the handlebars. She held her left hand underneath the square black box as she pushed it, while she pushed the center of the circled X. A short hiss and a puff of smoke came from the box. As the gray powder dropped into the woman's left hand, the powder looked like ashes to Danielle. She scooped them quickly into her mouth. What was that? Just cleaning out the Trag 7 power unit, Mrs. Happy replied. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Daniel straight at her. What happened to the bird? We haven't got time for birds, the old woman said quickly. Let's be honest. How did you like the tour and the sound of all that applause? It was music to your ears, wasn't it? It was rather nice. Nice, you loved it, Mrs. Happy said. Deep down, I showed you what you want for your future, didn't I, my boy? The Goliath Super Wings took you right to the place of your dreams and desires. I guess so, Daniel said slowly. And what a bright future it is, my boy, if and only if you play by the rules of the game. The old woman stared at him right in the eyes. How could I ever get to be #1, though, Daniel said. Barry's #1. But you have a Goliath Super Wings bicycle, Mrs. Happy said. As you can see, they are very special bicycles when properly equipped. Owning a Super Wings qualifies you for level 2 in the point system. That's the rules. Anyone on level 2 is automatically ahead of those on level 1. If you would look at your point breakdown under the category of possessions, you would see the value of the Super Wings. It's a bike of the future, my boy, and it's a bike in your future, isn't it? But what about my Spirit Flyer? Daniel asked, suddenly remembering the old red bike. That old bike, Mrs. Happy snorted. Why, there's no comparison between that junk heap and a fully loaded, totally equipped modern Super Wings. Wise up, child. That old bike is just an embarrassment that's holding you back from reaching your true potential. Yeah. But it's a gift from the Three Kings, Daniel said. Nonsense and lies, the old woman replied. Get in on the wave of the future with the Super Wings. Once you're #1, you'll really easily qualify for the Trag 7 power unit and some of the other very special units. Daniel looked at the golden Super Wings and all the shiny gadgets. Some of the gadgets looked very expensive and electronic. Others were coated in shiny chrome. They all looked interesting to a curious boy like Daniel. He wondered how they worked. You mean a Super Wings will fly like a Spirit Flyer? A Super Wings will fly better than a Spirit Flyer, and do a whole lot more, the old woman whispered. You just got a taste of what they can do. How many dead birds you got? But you have to have an activated number card to get them to work properly. That's why it's so important that you play by the rules. You've got to get into the game. Right now, your old Spirit Flyer is keeping you out on the bench, so to speak. Keeping you on the bench, so to speak. You aren't going anywhere with that old junk bicycle, and I think you know it. Your mother certainly knows how to play the game. I wouldn't think you'd want to keep disappointing her the way you have by being ranked blank. If you keep it up, you might even threaten her job at the factory. You wouldn't want that to happen. You mean she could lose her job because I'm ranked blank? Daniel asked. He felt a wave of fear pass through him. A sudden jolt of pain bit down into the back of his neck. Pain. Fear. How do you think it looks if the son of an important Goliath employee refuses to use good Goliath products like a Super Wings bicycle? But I am riding it, Daniel said defensively. I ride it more than I ride my Spirit Flyer even. Maybe you've been riding it more lately, but that's not the point, the old woman said carefully. Goliath Industries wants to show which bike you intend to ride the rest of your life. Are you loyal to their products and point of view or not? Your mother may be working for Goliath for a very long time. You don't want to mess that up. Daniel was quiet, even though he knew he was riding the Super Wings more. Hold on. Need a flip-top bottle. Sit on the floor with the top off and don't kick it. Okay. But she doesn't have to lose her job, Daniel protested feebly. Times are hard in this town, Mrs. Happy whispered. Your mother knows who butters the bread. Isn't it time you learned? And look at all you will gain if you just cooperate and show a little appreciation. You'll be number one, and with a smart boy like you, there's no telling how many levels you can go up. You can go up. You can go. There are more than 2 levels in the point system. Daniel asked, "How high do they go?" Oh, 33. How high can you count? The old woman asked with a giggle. It's that many plus one more. You can never reach the end of your potential with the point system. Daniel felt a great heaviness on him. All he wanted to do was run away. You can't run away, Mrs. Happy answered his thoughts. You can't run away from the point system. And I've been trying to tell you, it's the only game in town. And it's the only game in the whole world. Then what do I have to do? Daniel finally blurted out. The old woman smiled. She pulled out a piece of paper from her carpet bag, which looked like a sort of form. Just sign this paper, the old woman said. What is it? Daniel asked. His eyes were wet and blurry. It's just a loyalty form. Basically, all it says is that the son of a Goliath as the son of a Goliath employee, you agree to ride Goliath bicycles and use Goliath products. What about my Spirit Flyer? Daniel asked. This says you just agree not to ride it until the month is out. It's just a minor no-use clause. Then when we're satisfied you intend to keep your word, next month we'll have another form and a special bicycle chain and lock. Once that's taken care of, we'll discuss how you can obtain some of the fine attachments that make the Super Wing so very special, like the Trag 7 power unit. Where do I sign? Daniel asked with a sigh. The old woman took the needle from her hand. Daniel's eyes went wide with fear, but before he knew it, she grabbed his right hand and pricked his thumb. The old woman licked her lips as a little spot of blood appeared. Just press right there, the old woman said. She guided Daniel's hand onto the paper. A wet red thumbprint was left to dry at the bottom of the page. Will my number code work now? Daniel asked. Not quite, the old woman said. This is just the paperwork. You still need to prove yourself worthy. However, if you pass your initiation test within the Cobra Club, that will satisfy all the other requirements, at least for this month. But I don't know what the initiation test is yet. Mrs. Happy just smiled and took Daniel's arm to guide him to the front door. She turned the lock and opened the door quickly. She pushed Daniel outside. Just play the game like you mean it. Your points will be accumulating on the big board. You'll get the credit you so richly deserve. The old woman smiled, then closed the door in his face. Daniel looked down at his thumb. The blood had dried already. The devil pushes. The Holy Spirit leads gently and with a still small voice. If you got loud voices in your head, from God. And most people have voices screaming in their head. I wrote to somebody the old saying, 9 out of 10 voices in my head are telling me not to pull the trigger. But too many people on here are listening to those voices and they're doing everything they tell them to do. Yeah. Not good for those people. Not good for me right now, but not good for those people. It would be nice if people could hear the Lord and actually pray to God every day. Have a conversation with Him. Dear Papa, help me help me know what to do today. All right, well, I'm going to say goodbye. Good night. Hallelujah. See if anybody was on that I know. Oi. Oi. How you doing tonight? Anyway, my voice can only last for a chapter, so I'm not going to read 2. Someday I'll do 2, maybe. I'll do one in the morning and do one at night. Morning and evening. All right, good night. God bless. Sound right, yeah. I know you're so understanding. Thank you. Oh, turn up later. Yes, I want to exit. Okay.